one of the things I love the most about Ragnarok as an agency is that you guys are essentially platform agnostic. You don't pigeonhole yourself in a single stack or only work with customers if they use X or Y. But you do have a sort of short list of vendors that you specialize or partner with, maybe like a preferable list of tools. How do you go about evaluating new potential vendors when they kind of come up on the scene to add to your list of like things that we support?
Yeah, it's just funny because we get a lot of flack from partners about this as well, being like, "Why do you support our competitors?" It's like, at the end of the day, like we have just so much exposure to so many tools in the same, you know, sense part of that Martech stack. Like, I really don't have a bias anymore. Like, I think I used to have a bias, but once you worked in 6 or 7 or 8 or 9 of these, like everything's got its advantage, and you like kind of see the forest through the trees a bit more. I think as part of that criteria that comes into play, and a good example of this, right, is one of our newer partners that we brought on, a tool called Insider. They're really kind of based out of Europe. They have, they're a very interesting company, really trying to grow into the US here, but they're like a CDP meets a marketing automation tool that takes some of what Klaviyo does in terms of automating or making some really interesting, like recipe kind of out of the box stuff, and really plays really well in like a really sophisticated e-commerce platform, right? And I think that's just like, it's just a really interesting thing to build, right? It's interesting that it was built outside of the US because I feel like we're so big in e-commerce here.
Mm.
But they really kind of built this. I think they're based out of Turkey or something like that. But they built this really, really interesting platform, and as we went in and we were evaluating them because they, reached out, and a lot of, tools will reach out to us, but, we don't take every call. And, we go through and we evaluate it, and we sort of said, there's some really interesting things that you do here. I think there's a segment of the market that, would find this really valuable to do something like have an out of the box, out of stock notification campaign, or back in stock notification campaign, or a next best channel, or your pricing strategy works really well for this sector of the market. And the ultimate criteria that we look for though is like, this is going to be some really like simple stuff, but like, do you have APIs? Can I get data out? Can I get data in? Does your API support event-based data, right? Does it support things like arrays of objects? Can you support like a modern just way of feeding data back and forth? Do you have a great amount of, or a vast amount of resources or availability to increase pipeline bandwidth? So that way we can send, thousands and thousands of calls per second out to you. Like things like that are kind of like we'll call them like table stakes. Like, are you a modern marketing platform or not? And then I think from like, what part of the industry are you really focusing on? Like, what are you doing that's interesting that we could really actually add incremental value? And then I think lastly is, what is sort of the long-term vision of like what you're trying to build here? Are you just trying to be like do you want to just be a wannabe competitor, which is fine? Or are you trying to build something for an industry? Or are you trying to be like maybe even like vertical agnostic and build out, or horizontal, I guess is what they, say. I'll throw a lot of my Martech buzzwords in here just to make all the people all your listeners feel comfortable in the language they're used to hearing from salespeople every day. Like I think that's a big component of it.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of it is influenced by like, like I was a customer of Appboy in like 2013, right? Like
Hmm.
been a long time fan of Braze. I think what they're building is like super interesting, and they've really kind of carved out a space of like, you work with us with a CDP or with a reverse ETL player or some type of iPaaS. We have some options that you can do without that. But like what we focus on is the marketing experience, right? And then you have a tool like Segment, which after the Twilio acquisition was maybe more focused on, how do I kind of own, more of the space. And then they, sort of refocused on how do I be the best CDP in the market? And I had the opportunity to talk with some of their product team, yesterday, and they do this with us because we want to know like, what is your roadmap? And they were showing us
Hmm.
some things that they're building, and I'm like, like guys, this is exactly where you need to be.
Hmm.
Like really kind of doubling down on data transfer, data enrichment, data orchestration. But you're not stepping on the toes of like a Braze or an Iterable who are really doing this really well. And like you're it would just take you a while to kind of catch up to that. Um, and then some other tools in the space too, right? Like I love tools like Apps Flyer and Branch and Kochava, like these guys who are like doing something specifically for mobile analytics. Like it's not, maybe a marketing ops person doesn't necessarily run into these tools, but there is some inherent value in there. And so we sort of stretch our ways into that as well. And then of course, what I would say used to be called product analytics tools, but you're now like more marketing analytics, more just like company analytics, but not quite a BI tool like a Mixpanel and Amplitude, Heap. Like I think these are just phenomenal tools. And, I think again, like having a kind of modern dashboard builder that has some inherent like, we'll call it like synergy with, God, I hate myself for saying that word. Um, has some has some ability to sort of sync into an audience feature within a Braze or an Iterable or these other tools. Like I think it's just so powerful. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you have tools like Customer IO, right? Which are just like, I know they're a sponsor of the show, so of course I'm going to shout them out. But I love
Yeah.
Customer IO. I've been a huge fan of them forever. And I love the fact that they built like like a hybrid B2B, B2C, like really effective, like almost like like a SaaS solve, a real solve for like SaaS marketing, right? Just the fact
Mhm.
that they have like this native Salesforce connector, which nobody else really has at the degree that they do. They've handled object data for like the last 3 years. Like they're just so interesting. I think they're a real big pioneer. If I really look to them as one of the leaders in the space. And I feel like I'm rambling here, but the more or less like as we evaluate these tools, like what they're building and what they're building for is such a big component of it. Like maybe they don't have an event-based API now, but like a tool like OneSignal, for example, right? Like they own the push space. OneSignal is a great partner of ours. I love what OneSignal's building, right? Like they are
Mhm.
just the ultimate solve for like getting you started with marketing, and they built such a great platform around that while really being for engineers or really
Mhm.
friendly for engineers. And it's at this point in the last couple of years that they've built more of the tool for marketers. And I think they've like really kind of evolved their vision there. So it's a tool built for engineers that now really serves marketers well. So that's where we don't want to drop partners necessarily if they don't really meet the criteria anymore. But it really is like important for us to kind of go through, use the tool, see if we actually value it as individual, people who would go in and use these with clients. And then to sort of say what the staying power is like, is the vision of what you have, because ultimately that's what we're going to pitch on their behalf
Right.
or to talk about, in cases like this, or when I'm running advisory with, a Martech buying committee or something like that. And we're deciding like, well, how do I pick between these two different tools? It's like, well, where's your vision? Where's your vertical specialization? Where are the nuances? What does your data stack look like? How does that going to be able to implement? So I think that's all these kind of become core nuances. And when you're, probably like me and you have a conversation like 8 times a day about, what's Braze versus Iterable or Customer IO versus Klaviyo or this versus that, right? Like the nuance gets really important,
Mhm. Yeah, for sure.
because at base value, right, or at 30,000 foot view, which is where most of these people are making the buying decision, they're like, these things look the same, but I like the salesperson better. You have to be better than that when you
Yeah,
sort of invest
yeah.
in Martech. So